Welcome to Oakland Is. This show spotlights movers and shakers and image makers, positive things that happen every day and in ordinary ways and spectacular ways. Our special topic is the Black press, past, present, and future. Our special guest is Mr. Charles Aikens. My co-host is Ms. Yasmin Michele, and my name is Dr. Barbara Canon. I would like to ask our special guest, Mr. Charles Aikens, who has been with the Black press in the past, in the present, and I'm sure he'll be doing it in the future, to share with you.
40 years.
40 years, it's unbelievable. And then he played with the Baltimore Orioles at the age of 19. He's just been a trailblazer in so many different ways. One thing I wanted you just to share with us was your Ford Fellowship that you did back years ago.
Okay, in June 1969, I was a senior, ex-baseball player trying to get a college degree at California State College in Haywood. And I saw this fellowship being announced that there was going to be a program in Richmond, Virginia for contestants who could write an essay and then be called to Richmond, Virginia, where you would be interviewed by a group of people on being potentially future journalism leaders in the country. They chose 15 people out of 450 who applied for the fellowship from Jamaica to Canada, and I was one of those fortunate 15. We had 410 seminars in 1 year in Washington, D.C., and I was able to meet some of the key cast of characters who ran government in Washington, D.C., including Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who we spent a half day with in Washington, D.C., and he came over from the Supreme Court and talked to us and told us about what a Supreme Court justice should be like. He said they shouldn't go to parties because if you go to parties, you might be influenced by the people attending those parties, and they might influence government by influencing you.
Charles, can you give the audience, tell us how the Black press got started? If you could give us a brief history, and who were some of the main characters,
okay,
and that were instrumental in the Black press.
Okay. Yasmin, the Black press was started by John Rushworm and Samuel Cornish, two guys who became editors of the paper in 1827. They met in the home of a man named Cromwell, Crumwell, and they were trying to get and bring an end to the denigration, especially at that time, of the black female, who was being called all kinds of names in the New York Age, which was the paper that existed at that time. And so they started this paper, and they dealt with political, social, and economic issues, and they also dealt with the cultural characteristics of black people.
Right, because at that time the paper was started when the
John Rushworm and Samuel
Cornish. And it was said that they were saying the saying was, or the motto was, is that we need to voice our own concerns.
Right,
and
we need to tell our own story.
Be able to tell our own stories.
Too long, others have spoken for us.
Actually, as it is now, oftentimes. So with some of the main characters, I know that Frederick Douglass, Martin Delany, and Booker T. Washington were some of the early main characters of the Black press. Can you just give us a little comparison and contrast of those three individuals?
These guys were all strong men, obviously. Frederick Douglass was a slave who taught himself to read, and he wrote his Path to Freedom. At that time, reading was sort of outlawed for black people. They didn't want slaves to learn how to read. Mm-hmm. But Frederick Douglass's slave master gave him books and taught him how to read. And so he became one of the most prolific speakers against the abolition of slavery in the world at that time. And he traveled all over the United States and even in Europe speaking about the horrors of slavery. Martin Delany was the Frederick Douglass started the North Star, and the North Star existed from 1947 to 1847 to 1860.
And you said that there was a relationship when we were talking earlier between Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany. Can you touch on
Delany
that?
joined Frederick Douglass on the North Star, and he was accused of being the one who was making Frederick
Who was accused?
think blacker in
Okay.
his thought processes, and he was a nationalistic kind of guy. He wrote Blake, the Huts of America, which was a definition of black manliness. And Frederick Douglass, he helped Fred Douglass to be more of a black man than Frederick might have been by being taught by his white master. And Frederick was married to the opposite race, and he was not a militant race-hating kind of guy. But neither was Delany, but he was just blacker, and he knew the history of black people, and he wanted Frederick to reflect some of that black culture.
Okay, so and with that, and reflecting some of the black culture, can you just speak briefly to how Booker T. Washington fit into this whole piece?
Booker T. Washington came after Frederick Douglass
Exactly.
was getting tired, after he had gotten tired. Booker T. Washington emerged. Each time one gets tired, we have to have new leaders. And Booker T. Washington became the new leader, and Booker T. Washington started Tuskegee Institute, I think. And Booker T. Said, seek ye first the real estate, because that's where all wealth comes from. And if we seek real estate and become independent economically, we'll be able to have some influence politically later on.
So speaking so speaking of that independence, Dr. Canon, you had some questions for Charles around that independence of the black newspaper?
Well, I was going to ask you about the viability of the black press today as a comparison to what happened back in history.
Well, today the black press's viability is no different. It's as viable as it was then. It might not be as powerful simply because the civil rights movement, most of the goals that we had for civil rights have been accomplished. We actually have a black president in the country now, and people don't think civil rights are as important. But there are issues that are extremely important, and I think you mentioned some of those a while ago, the current issues that are important. I can't remember all of them, but
yeah, I have a list of those. Some
what
of them,
are they, Bob?
Yeah, some of them were called education, poverty issues, economics, black on black crime, violence, of course, positive points about integration versus negative points about integration.
Right.
All of those. So in terms of the black press, can those issues be addressed more effectively today?
Well, the electronic media provides a great opportunity for those who can capitalize on it, in that you can get digital prints of your newspaper, quality newspaper. You can produce quality newspapers in a hurry now because of the electronic media. Also, today they're more educated people in our communities. Although I don't know if that people are taking journalism, and if the journalists are learning the things that will give them the ability to tell the stories about people, places, and things that's needed. You know, any newspaper, whether it's black, white, yellow, green, or purple, needs to tell the truth and tell it in a hurry, because we're in a rapidly changing society, and the knowledge spectrum changes every 5 years.
Right. So,
now.
and speaking as far as telling the truth, it was said that the black newspapers that they made no bones about it as far as that they were advocates for black folks. They were advocates.
Right.
It was the newspaper, the black newspaper, was a tool for black people to organize communities in all throughout the United States. So
Right.
when you speak of the electronic media now and about the importance of telling the truth, so two questions I have. One is, how do you know, or how can we concentrate on reading 1, 2, 3, or 4 electronic newspapers, and how does that differ from regular hard copy print? And where do we go as far as the advocacy on facing the issues that Dr. Cannon, discussing the issues and having an open forum about many of the issues that Dr. Cannon talked about, black on black crime, the economics of black folks, education, on and on?
Well, we have to have journalists who can dig through the facts and tell the story on issues of concern for the times that we're in. If you look historically back to Freedom Journal, what Freedom Journal did, as I said before, was to give an overview of political, social, and economic problems during that day. There's still political, social, and economic problems that exist today.
Definitely.
They don't end, and the habits of the press, the good habits of the press don't end. You still have to tell the truth. You have to tell it in a hurry. You have to explain things by using sources of information that come to you. You have to be able to investigate, to find out things that people need to know, and you have to be able to get it out rapidly.
So then the question is that happening? Is that being done effectively today?
Well,
And if so, who are some of the persons that are making that happen?
Well, I think if I look at the papers today, I've written for a few of them. The Sacramento Observer is doing a great job as a newspaper in Northern California. The LA Sentinel is doing a great job in the Hollywood area. The San Diego Voice and Viewpoint is doing a good job there. The Arizona Informant is doing a good job with the Campbell brothers in Arizona. Well, these are guys who went to McClymonds here in Oakland that ran for the Senate.
And what about the Bay Area, the immediate Bay Area? I think the Bayview,
okay,
the
New
Post.
Bayview is a hard-hitting paper. Its tone is consistently the same, but it hits hard all the time. Sometimes I wonder if they shouldn't soften up and come back hard another time, but they do a good job of telling a story that the daily press is not going to tell.
Right, exactly.
Most of the white newspapers are not going to interpret the black issues as black people want them to, and so the black press has to be give the black point of view so that they deal with what did you say?
The advocacy
They
advocate
tell our story.
and being able to tell our stories.
Yeah,
and
that's what Freedom Journal
and
said.
talking about the issue of being objective and non-objective. Again, they just told it the way that they saw it, and again made no bones about it. And so when we were talking about the importance, as we're talking about
they were objective and they were also subjective because they took a point of view of hard-hitting point of view that came from their feelings and their emotions. And so that objectivity is something that gives a journalist credibility in his community because he deals with both sides. That's what objectivity means. You deal with both sides and you don't take sides. And that's what gives you credibility as a journalist.
Okay, but in that,
and that's needed.
But speaking in that point of telling both sides, I guess when we're talking about the early black press, were there really two sides when you were talking about the lynchings?
Look at the Tulsa riots when 300 people were killed in Oklahoma, and the white press made it look like blacks was responsible for themselves being killed. When some woman was allegedly raped, that was made up. and the black press had to give its point of view to balance the story out.
Exactly.
That's the role of the black press today, to balance some of that negativity that comes from the white press out.
There's an Oakland Post, a San Francisco Post, and maybe other Post newspapers also
Right.
that are black newspapers.
Right, these are black newspapers. The Sun Reporter, and that's been around since the 1940s, when Tom Fleming and Dr. Carlton Goodlett started that newspaper. The Post was started in 1964. Tom Nash and I were the first two reporters for the Oakland Post newspaper when it was on Sacramento Street in Ashby, up here in Berkeley, when Tom Berkeley started.
And so I wanted to ask, is there a, I mean, as a journalist myself, I'm looking to see that, or see that there are not really any regional or national black newspapers. Can you speak?
Well, I subscribe to the Savannah Tribune
Okay.
and also the Tennessee Tribune, and both of those are
Good
outstanding.
newspapers, huh?
Tennessee Tribune is exceptional.
Right,
It started
right.
by a black gastroenterologist, and his family keeps it going. And it emphasizes the highlights of the positive things that are happening. And it's a trailblazing newspaper.
Right, it can be extremely educational. I think Dr. Lee does a good job up in Sacramento with his paper, because he covers that community like a blanket. You know, he just does stories on little people, big people, and things that need to be done, positive things happening in the community. It's a balanced newspaper, and I think Dr. Lee is the senior black publisher in the country now, and he's respected highly because he has a quality tabloid newspaper that comes out every week, and they do magazines sometime on the Sacramento community, and he's made that a publishing empire.
And speaking of a publishing empire, as Dr. Canon, you had mentioned about advertising.
Yes.
You
Yes.
were speaking of a question.
Are black newspapers dependent on advertising as the source of their publications?
Yeah, they need it. They need it more than anybody else, because the white community doesn't advertise as freely in the black press. The black press is having to survive off the churches. They get church ads, and they get a few business ads, a few lawyers, maybe a few people in the community might advertise, and they're producing those papers on
A
thin
shoestring
budgets.
on a shoestring budget.
But they don't have big budgets. They don't have mega bucks like Rupert Murdoch to buy off all the newspapers in the area in England and Australia and all
right,
over.
and speaking of that, Dr. Canon, I'd just like to ask him, with the lack of advertising, how does advertising affect what you read, or how something is written, if it's objective or not objective, if it's slanted or not slanted, and more importantly, what you will not say, will or will not say, because you're dependent upon advertising, particularly for the black press, as you're covering black history.
Advertisers have influence on papers.
Exactly.
People are not going to bite the hand
In a major
that
way.
feeds it, like a dog don't bite the hand that feeds. People don't bite the hand that feeds it sometime too. And you know, but I don't think that the black press gets enough ads to worry about the white press
Okay.
censoring, causing them to censor themselves. They get more from the black churches and all the organizations in the black community than they do from all the white publications, all the white advertisers in general. Advertising lets you know, lets people know who you are, where you are, and what your product is.
I think one of the most historically significant creations was the Black Business Listings by Dr. C. Diane Howell, who passed away a few years back.
Right.
But I think that what she did literally was to help promote a lot of the businesses, the entrepreneurs.
Right. That was a special interest paper.
Yes, and then she would have the Black Exposition to supplement and complement what she was doing with that newspaper.
The only thing that I saw, I didn't see in the paper, was current reportage on issues of importance in the community.
Right.
Most of those things could be written up and held for weeks and weeks at a time. They had pictures of business people that told who they were and how people could get in touch with them or use them. But there was only a few stories written by people like Keith Carson, Sandre Swanson, Barbara Lee, or some of those people. Those were good, but those were not journalists writing stories from a hard-hitting, straight-ahead, hard news perspective.
Yes.
Hard news is the news that you go out and dig up and find and make it current and get it out in a hurry. But wasn't happening with that paper.
And also Chauncey Bailey wrote a column in the Tribune. And I remember when we had Dr. Dorothy Height here, we had her at 6 different places. San Jose, the Oakland area.
I interviewed Dr. Height.
And she was at the Commonwealth Club as well, but also Contra Costa. Well, anyway, I was able to get him to do a whole series of articles about her 6 places that she went here in the Bay Area.
Right.
But that was something that Chauncey Bailey did. You remember the work that I think you worked
Chauncey
with.
was a good journalist.
Yes.
He was the person who used to come in my classes when I was teaching at
right?
Grove Street College. And unfortunately, Chauncey was killed, and he was a person that I admired because I thought Chauncey was a junior Barack Obama. He might have been an Obama one day if he had lived long enough. He had some of the talent, and he wasn't offensive to white people, and he could go both ways. And I thought that was why he was able to work with the Oakland Tribune for 12 to 15 years, because but he had some personal problems that ended his career at the Tribune. I actually thought,
and so whatever that was, Chauncey was definitely an advocate for Black folks and telling our stories. And so with that, and being able, as we are running, a little out of time, can you speak to being able to tell our stories, continue telling our stories, and the position of the Black press now? I mean, I've been looking at, the media and commercials and things like that, where they're not really showing Black families. It's oftentimes mixed race. And although we know that that's relevant and that it's happening, it's this whole continuing misogyny of Black women, the degradation of the whole gangster rap style, with the males. And so speaking of that, it seems like the Black press oftentimes, or are we moving to where it's becoming limited? As I was told that Johnson, the publisher of Ebony, has sold, I guess, a portion of the magazine to J.P. Morgan,
so
and Essence, of course, Essence went to sold, I guess, in its entirety or a portion of it to Time Warner. So yeah, can you speak to the future of the Black press?
Well, I don't think that we should be selling all of our definition type papers that define Black culture and show us in our diversity. We are very diverse people, and we as broad as any people on the earth, and so we should be seen in all these different lights. One of the things that happens when people buy and get these global empires of newspapers is that they take over the points of view, and you only get what they want you to get.
Exactly.
And we have to watch that in today's newspaper. We said yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to have to watch these mega newspapers and mega news industries taking over all of the points of view and giving only their point of view. We should always tell our own story. Freedom Journal said, for too long others have told our story. Now it's time we speak for ourselves. I think that's the motto of Freedom Journal.
Yeah, and it seems like the press is taking a lot of the internet options as a way to get the word out too. So I noticed that there are a lot of sites now that deal with Black issues, Black culture, things of that sort.
Right.
So it isn't always the printed newspaper that we will be relying on in the future? Do you see that happening as the way?
Well, you know, when you get stuff off the internet, you're getting certain people's point of view.
All right.
But you know, that doesn't mean that it's truly objective, or
That's
it
right.
doesn't mean that you're getting diverse points of view. You're just getting
Information.
editorializing.
And it may not even
There's
be
a
written by
difference between
a
hard news and editorializing.
As
Hard
well.
news is what God lets happen and people reporting on it. But editorializing is what you think things should be. That comes from your own subjective perspective.
As we wrap up,
Huh?
that we would like to thank you so much for helping us get a handle on this, the press from the past, the present, and the future.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would.